Devlog. This is number 39. On Monday, I spent most of Monday working on the different cases. I had to go through each of the IK cases for crouching and each of the pistols. So crouching, holding, crouching left, aiming corner right, and then the other case is standing, looking right, standing, looking left, aiming, standing right, and then aiming left. So, like I did before, but with my new system, pretty much recording all the hand positions, and then I had to do it again for every one of those cases for the actual rifle. So recording again. So it's a bit time consuming, but I got it looking pretty good for each of the weapons for all of the cases. That was Monday. So on Tuesday, I had to go through and do a little bit of extra work, not just for the aiming pose, but also make sure, like in regular aiming, that the aim is controlled by the aim rig. That's going to be important for what I need to do for the corner aiming. So I had to make sure the weight was on for aiming rig, and then everything was all lined up. And there's a whole, with my new system, there's a whole other set of procedures in order to record the right position and switch the torso IK points to the hand IK points on aiming. So I got that work done, and I started working on an issue of the mesh clipping through cover. So one of the things that was bothering me, if you kind of look at the tail, it's not so obvious anymore, but before, like when you see the tail clipping through the obstacle, it would actually show like a very bright blue, like the X-ray. And that was fine before when I'm behind a wall to actually see, but the problem was I didn't really want it. I didn't really want it to happen. I only want it to happen when you're behind the wall, not when you're up against a wall. I didn't really want that highlight to show. And I started kind of looking into how I can actually solve this issue. Admittedly, it's kind of a small thing, but it's a bit of like production polish that I kind of wanted to see if there was a fix for that. And that kind of brought me to working on it on Wednesday. So on Wednesday, I spent most of the day trying to find a solution to only show the X-ray when you're behind the obstacle. I dove deep into shaders again and started searching for a potential solution. Kind of asking AI, hey, how can I solve this problem? Because previously it just being handled like a simpler, like there was support on YouTube for the way I have it set up here is in my my renderer. It works through like a depth test. If it's behind, if this layer is behind another layer, it'll show up. But unfortunately, that also means it'll show up in this case as well. I was working with stencil functionality, and if you can imagine like a portal where you can see like a plane and the plane kind of acts like a mask, and it masks out certain things depending on the camera position. It was pretty cool tech, and I was able to like kind of mask out this obstacle here. But by the end of the day, I got the stencil working, but it was actually having the exact same problem where even though I was in front, the mask couldn't determine whether I'm in front of the mask plane or behind the mask plane. It would pretty much do the exact same thing as it is doing now, whether I'm in front or back. And in the end, I put too many hours in it for kind of a too little return on value. And I just settled on kind of toning down the X-ray, because one thing I tried was the original X-ray shader. It wasn't bright blue, but it looked more like this, and it's like, okay, that's great. And it actually worked as a shader right out of the box. And it worked on a simple depth test, and that would actually work. It wouldn't show up if you were in front or clipping. The only problem is you have to put shaders on all of your characters' skin meshes, and then you could but it wouldn't know the depth test of like the legs. It would actually show the tail, the blue outline on the characters. So I couldn't really tell the shader, hey, unless I had like masterful HLSL skills, I couldn't really say, hey, if this shader is on the character, ignore it. And then if it's on a different layer. So it doesn't really work like that easily out of the box where you can actually tell the shader to detect different layers. I'm sure it's possible, but it's really advanced stuff. So I settled on toning down the color to where, yes, you can kind of still see the tail go through, but it's not as noticeable, and it's not even a big deal. So sometimes kind of the lesson is like, you're looking for a solution, but sometimes the Unity engine and the resources, AI and YouTube, just kind of come up empty, and you kind of have to settle for a kind of a compromise solution. Otherwise, it's like, it's like some situations you have to kind of throw in the towel. If there's you've kind of exhausted your ideas, exhausted your solutions, and AI and YouTube or anything is not coming up with anything else you can try. So after that, I moved on to the next issue of fixing the stealth shader. The original one, I had it working with the old model, but I noticed there was a problem with the old one's transition that was not really working as intended. So I had to kind of go in and rework and slightly modify and bring up the polish on the stealth transition. So slightly modify the system. And by the end of the day, I had a prototype just working on like the pants of the character that was looking pretty good. It's funny because I was just running around, just the pant legs were running around. That kind of cracked me up. But that brings us to Thursday. So on Thursday, I spent the day reworking the stealth functionality for the new model, and so my problem was that in the original model, when you stealth out, there would be this kind of, it wouldn't transition smoothly. It didn't really work in the first place. Like, I didn't really notice clearly. I wasn't looking at that level of detail polish, but the inner model would still be reflected in the translucent, and at the end it would cut out. It would kind of be not really a polished kind of thing. So this pass, I tried to get it as smooth as possible. And take a look here. So I was trying to figure out, okay, how do I make this opaque material? How do I make it transition, like fade smoothly into into the translucent, right? Instead of just cutting out at some point and kind of clipping. So what I did, I was working with shaders, and I started to integrate the whole stealth shader. I started to manually integrate and test and start off with Unity provides a duplicate of a URP lit. So I took the shader graph of this other one, and I popped it in here, and I manually reconstructed the properties and hooked everything up to kind of test and see, okay, I have an all-in-one shader that I can apply to my character model, and when I flip a dial, it'll, in theory, it should transition smoothly from an opaque to the full shader. After I had that all set up, I tested it, and the problem was with this shader is that the end material, it has to be of a material type. It has to be of type lit. So I was trying to... So the difference between these two materials, this material and the translucent one, it can't be both. That's the thing. It can't be both a translucent material and an opaque material, and it can't really transition from one to the other. The system doesn't support that. So, you know, and then if you have your regular non-opaque, there's something where it's like it never really, I found that it never really goes full opaque even if it's a translucent material. Sometimes there's some cases where you can actually sort of see through it, and it's not, you know, for the regular gameplay you want a full opaque PBR. So that little testing didn't really bear fruit, but the next solution was to kind of, instead of two sets, one with the regular and one with the stealth, I decided to have a 3 sets, another intermediary where you have, just like before, you have your here you have your main opaque, and then this intermediary one is actually a translucent one. It's not active right now. Activated. Yeah, see how I couldn't use a translucent. It's kind of see-through. But what I do on the transition, right at a certain point, I had to kind of go in and fine-tune it, but right at a certain point, when the effect takes over, it actually swaps in, and there's barely any notice on the clipping, it swaps in the translucent model, and then it fades out that translucent model, and then disables it. So it's fully translucent. So it has this kind of smooth transition now. And it took some doing to get this figured out and rework the system to support a three-tiered kind of thing. So I got it good, but then I noticed that my Magica cloth, see how the coat moves, wasn't really working when you're stealthed. I wanted that level so you can't really notice it. It's because you're translucent that the tail and the hair and the coat's not moving. But I wanted to go the extra mile and get that little polish. Even though you won't really notice it, like, especially on the transition or when you're. It's just nice to like have that, So I worked with Magica Cloth and I set up a system in order to get that working. I had to fiddle around a bit, but I got that taken care of. And those little finer details, like, I don't think you want to skip over. You know, it's like you want to get as close to production polish as you can. So, the next issue I was noticing was that the shadow cast on the ground when you stealth in was still active. They're still casting a shadow, and it just looked kind of odd when you're in cover or something, and the actual shadow picks up on the translucency and it puts dark spots and everything on there. So I kind of want to do the same thing. I was like, okay, can we take this casted shadow and can we fade it out on the transition? So again, I tried to research a way to actually try to do this, and I was coming up with stuff where you can actually, in the shader, you can control the received shadows. That's shadows that are cast on the model itself, but you can't really control external casted shadows from the shader, which I found out. The only real way to do that is to actually control the external lights. In my other scene, I was working with a direct light, like a sun source, and I noticed in this interior you can actually set up light layers to have different lights affect different layers in the scene. Like, you know, some lights can cast shadows on objects and some lights only cast shadow on the player. I thought you could be able to do that with a direct light, but it turns out that's not supported. That's a limitation of Unity's system. So if you wanted to control the light, the shadow just for the character in a direct light source, and, you know, control the strength and dim it down on transition, that is not possible without affecting all other objects in the scene that are casting a shadow. So there's, you know, I was coming up empty-handed, spinning my wheels, and there was probably some way, but unless you're an HLSL master and know some black magic, it's just not an easy direct control option that Unity provides, and that's just the way it goes. So I had to make another compromise. So instead of fading out the shadow on transition, it will actually cut as soon as the transparent model comes in, and then it'll cut back in. You know, I don't think that's too big of a deal. It's better than having a shadow, I think, when you're stealthed. And that's pretty much the best that I can get the Unity system to offer without going crazy with, you know, super advanced shader logic. I was really getting into the weeds trying to solve this, and it's just not. It's like, maybe if I was like really good and I knew what I was doing, I could try something, but just the AI and the support to get this thing done, it's just, I've learned that if it's not right there and, you know, somewhat reasonable to do, then it's probably not worth, you know, trying to do it at all costs. So, you know, it's one of those things. But I got it looking the best for now, and started working on the next issue, which was the corner aim input. So not just the aim pose, but actually being able to control with your right stick when you're in the corner, the direction that you're shooting. So that was for Friday. Alright. So on Friday, I was able to finalize the aim for the corner aim input. Most of it was already working still, surprisingly. The system was still mostly intact for the actual corner aiming of the standing, but the broken part was actually the corner aiming for the crouching. So I had to go in and polish things up. I had to fiddle around with the aim rig and whatnot, and all the adjustments in order. But I got it working. I got it working better than it was before. You can actually do a full. I locked in the axes so you can do like a full 90 degrees, and it doesn't look weird like it did before, where he actually, when he turns, it kind of stretches his body weirdly, or it adjusts the aim where he's not aiming level. So I got that working. Had to polish a few things up, but I committed everything back to the main branch after like a month, and branched from there. But I made a mistake of confusing my source and destination branches in a previous merge. So when I branched from the main branch, some things were broken. Not the whole project, but specifically this level here. A lot of the materials and different things were all messed up and broken and not looking right. So I had to figure out how to kind of package up from another branch this actual prototype level, like all its dependencies, into a package, and then import it back into this branch instead of so it took some doing, but it's a lot better than actually sitting here and trying to rebuild and refix like a thousand different little things, and try to remember what you did. So I got it looking the way it was after a bit. So I couldn't really decide after that what I wanted to go with. I wanted to work on the new shield for the character, but I also wanted an enemy AI to test the shield. I'm kind of itching to get onto the enemy AI version 2 with the behavior tree. So I decided to kind of import these new. I have a few production grade enemies, and these are the ones that I currently own. And I was gonna do robots, but I think these, cybugs, I call them cybugs, but they're kind of like cyber insects. I think they'd be pretty cool for instead of like robots. They're kind of sci-fi and cyber, I guess. So yeah, I can go with cybugs if I wanted to, but I have a few of them from a package I bought, and they're high quality, and they come with a bunch of animations out of the box. The only problem is they don't. This is a cool model, but he's not really suited for shooting. He's more like, a lot of these are the animations they come with. They are like melee animations. So nothing really that would have a gun and shoot for, but they're pretty sweet. I think I could see myself using these in some sense, but if I wanted to adapt them, I'd have to do some animation work, which I'm trying to avoid. But in order to model and animation work, in order to put guns on them and have them act like a ranged enemy character. So I decided to actually work on the new shield. So my plan is to get a testing object working. Instead of bringing out my old AI robot to shoot at me, I'm gonna make this little object here, kind of like write a script to actually spawn projectiles in the direction of the character, just so I can test out the new shield the new shield functionality. And I looked at the new shield package I bought, and it's actually pretty sweet. It's it takes the basic shield I made and it brings it to another level. So I think that's really going to be good. That's work for next week. So I'll be doing that. And I think once I get the shield done, I'll be working on a new AI. I might not use these. I might pull just a basic biped humanoid with a gun for testing out new behavior tree AI logic, something like that. We'll see how that goes next week. But that is about it for now. Thanks for joining, and